time has come to change these tracks. So they're in pretty rough shape. All the clay down at Diamond Grove Adventures kind of did them in, so they got worn out a little sooner than what I was hoping. But while I'm doing that, I'm going to go ahead and replace the front and rear rollers. And then this time the tracks actually came like a package deal with the sprockets and stuff like that. So I don't normally change those every time. I think they recommend it, but mine aren't in bad shape, but there is some wear. My rear rollers, the only reason I'm changing them is because the steel right here on them is so thin that they're actually bending and cracking, which it's muddy. And I know I probably should have power washed it, but I don't think we have a working power washer here, and we got like 1.5 inches of rain last night, so we'll just take everything off, kind of scrape this junk off. I may repaint the idlers and rollers and such like that, but as you can tell here, it's got a dent, and that's not near as thick. So those are the original rear rollers, and actually all the smaller rollers are original. This machine's got 9,089 hours on it now. These will be the second set of sprockets that I've changed. I think I changed them the first time at 6,000 hours, I believe, and they were actually like points. I mean, you can tell it's a little more kind of concaved here. That tooth is a little bit smaller, so I just didn't, since I've already got them, I didn't want to put brand new tracks with sprockets that are already worn, because you kind of wear the tracks a little bit quicker than what you would leaving them. And the only reason I'm putting front idlers on here again, because I think I did that, I want to say I did that last time I put the tracks on, and the bearings and such were fine. It was just the steel on the idler itself was so worn down that it was cutting into the other tracks. But the bad part about this time is this side, I noticed Saturday, which is muddy so you won't see it now, but it's dripping oil down here. These are sealed bearings that you can't service or replace. I don't really rant a whole lot here, but this is one thing that's kind of aggravating is these front idlers have 1,670 hours on them. The ones that I took off originally had 7,400 hours on them, and like I said, the bearings were fine. I just wore the steel out. Now the steel's okay, but the bearings went to crap. So I mean, that just tells you this is a 2011 model. So yeah, in the last 10 or 11 years, how I'm trying to word all this nicely, how things they're built cheaper, but they cost more money, and they last like a quarter of, they didn't even make it half the time on there. That's the aggravating part. So they weren't as bad as I thought. They're $350 a piece, but hopefully, I don't know if they were aftermarket or what. I got them at my local dealer here in town before they lost Takeuchi. So these are actually Talk brand stuff. Some people will say it's the exact same thing, which it could be, but yeah, we'll slap them on there and see how long they last. So, because that, like I said, that bearing is down. I mean, you may not be able to see any of it. Yeah, it's just down inside here. So that's was right in here where it's dripping the oil and stuff like that out. So like I said, I get it, because everything's disposable anymore. It's just chuck it and throw it away. I mean, it's like appliances and stuff like that. You know, used to washers and dryers would last 20 years. Now you get 2 or 3 out of them, you're doing good. So but like I said, I'm not going to get sidetracked on that. I don't try to do a whole lot of negative stuff. It's just some of the stuff it gets a little annoying. So I mean, that's the reason I love this machine right here. As old as it is, it's just everything on them was built longer to last. Like I said, even this is a 2011, so even what, 10, 11 years ago. So there's just been a huge change in how things used to be built. I got my blocks, and that's the first thing I'll do. I mean, there's like a million different ways people all over YouTube change these tracks. I normally try to do it in my shop. Like I said, I have access to a forklift, so that makes life a whole lot easier. Some people don't. You can use the Mini X or bars and such like that, but you definitely want to get some good blocks. I try to use like railroad ties and bigger 4x4 blocks, and you just stick them down underneath the back, and then I'll just use the bucket to raise the front end of it up. And then like I've done in the past, we'll take the grease cert out, I'll put the board behind the arms, push the front idler back, and then we'll pop the front of the track off and then take it off there. It's really not too involved. Then there's just 4 bolts in the front idler, 4 in the bottom rear roller, but you got to take that off first in order to take the sprocket off, because it hits right there. So I actually had these off before, but I just put the original ones back on because they weren't in that bad a shape then, and kept running them. So they've actually got another 3,000 hours or whatever since I changed all those. You need a 13 millimeter to take the bolts off this cover here. You can't see them. Like I said, it's nice and muddy outside, so like I said, I should have, I don't know, rinsed it off with the hose or whatever. My power washer is kind of crapped out, so that's another thing that's on the list. Is I want to find a good power washer that's actually got like a boiler or whatever to hook hot water up to it. I think I can wash all this stuff and take a little bit better care of it. But then I believe it's a 19 that'll take the grease fitting out, and then we'll pop that front roller back. So let's get to it. I actually keep this ratchet and socket in my grease gun deal. That's why it's as nasty as it is. I probably should have rinsed this off with the hose at least. Oh, yeah, got a little water in there. Now these wheels start going down just with the weight of the track a little bit. And here, letting the grease out and I'll take the forklift over here and just kind of stab the track right there, and I'll pop it off the front idler, and then I'll work on taking it off the top of the sprocket. And then you want to make sure the back or the front of the machine's up high enough to pick this rear roller up enough, which I'll probably have to go back up with it some more to let these tabs come out from underneath it. But that's actually the easiest way on these. It's just the opposite when you put it back on. You slide it over there, start at the bottom, work it over that, and then kick the front end over there, and they kind of jump right on. That front idler didn't come back as far as it probably should. There's probably some junk or whatever up in there, but yeah, that's how I get those off. So now we'll pop that off with the forklift, and then work on taking off the sprockets and rollers and idlers. the sockets. This one's 24 millimeter, I believe, and then these are 22s. Get them busted loose. We'll pop the rear roller out, and then we'll work the sprocket off, and then we'll jump up to the front idler. Now that I got those off there, I'm kind of doing like a little comparison. So, and yeah, you can tell these rollers are quite a bit worn out. You can see how much difference it is. Let me get my tape measure and see. I mean, it's like half as thick as what these are. And like I said, I mean, right there's a dent. That thing's dented in. So yeah, those were long overdue. Those are the original rear rollers. So like I said, like 9,089 hours on them. And then I didn't really clean them off very well, but you can kind of see how it's got a lip right there. They're supposed to be smooth. So I've worn the inside down. All right, the GoPro only had 43% left of the battery, so it died. So, but yeah, I've probably worn that down, I'd say at least 1/4 of an inch on there with that lip on the inside of there. So yeah, the bearings are fine. There's no play in them, it's just worn all the steel out. And then the front idlers, I have no idea how you get a flat edge on there. These, like I said, only got 1,670 some odd hours on them, but I can't figure out, unless that's just from I don't know, running over rocks or something. That's weird that it's like a flat edge right there. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And then here's the two Sprocket, which I'm sure you can't tell because my floor's so dirty, but this one's not bad. I mean, you can kind of see it here on this edge. It's kind of cupping a lot more. It doesn't have like this straight angle to it. It's more round or whatever, a cup. So they're pretty worn. I mean, they're not terrible, but I don't want to throw them on the new track. So now I'm going to kind of take a putty knife and scrape all that junk off and get all the mud that's up in there out, and we'll slap all the new ones on and then repeat the process on the other side. Okay, time to put the sprockets back on, and this side goes to the outside. It's a little more flush or smooth, where this side's set in just a little bit, so that way it slides back over and gets in line. So you just kind of line these up, and then they recommend using red Loctite because I don't know what these torque at, but you want them tight and you don't want them backing out. slides. Then I gotta bolt it back up to the now track adjuster. It's like a big U-looking plate and a great big bolt with a spring on it. And you put grease in it and it pushes that plunger and the spring and everything forward. And that's what tensions the tracks. Hopefully it doesn't break. Side is ready for a track, so yeah, now we'll just repeat the process on the other side and throw the tracks back on it. That was the most aggravating set of tracks I've ever put on there. And I think part of the problem is you could tell they're really stiff. And they've been laying over here since, I think, September or whatever last year when I bought them and the sprockets. Like I said, it's only like 28 degrees, so it's not much warmer inside here. So I would say next time, which I didn't really plan on doing this today, it was just kind of one of those since it was too wet. It may be a good idea to take these off the little pallet or set them outside in the sun, because man, it was, you can see I have all this slack right here from where it was laying down, so then I couldn't get that to lay flat enough, because normally what I do, and don't really have any problem with it, I'll set the top of the track over the sprocket and then I'll kick the bottom in underneath that rear roller and then you put it over the front idler. But with that extra slack and that thing not wanting to move at all, that was a pain. So the good news is we just got to shoot grease to it and it's all done. So we'll get the grease gun. I'll put the grease zerk back in, and then it actually needs to be like what it shows in the book. You take the blocks out from underneath there and you actually push the bucket down until the back end hits. So the machine is tilted way back. I can pretty much tighten them up in the shop here because I'm already gouging the floor up, but I'll get them pretty close and I'll take them out there and run them, and then I'll probably have to do that, 2 or 3 times to kind of get them within adjustment. And that adjustment on these is from the bottom of this roller to the track. You want in between 1 to 2 inches in here. So I'll kind of show you when we start greasing it up. I think I'd have to look. I know that's on the 250s and probably the 240. I would think all the 230, 240, 250s would all be the same, but I'm not 100% sure on that. And it may be a little bit different range on like the H10s and 12s, but I do know on these 250s, it's in between 1 to 2 inches. I'll run mine. I normally run them just a touch on the tight side so I can get on hills and different things like that. Now when I'm kind of breaking them in, I'll probably set them at like 1 3/4 inches. So they'll be a little bit loose because these things actually will stretch, but you also don't want to run them so tight that you stretch them out, and that's how you break those cables that are inside there. So you kind of want to watch that, because there's 2 sets of steel cables. There's one on the outside here, and then there's one on each side of this bar, and then another one on the outside. So these OEM tracks have 4 steel bands around the steel bars in here, where like the aftermarket ones just do the one on the outside. So you lose all your strength with that extra wire right here on both sides where this sprocket comes around and grabs. So that's a big difference in the OEM versus aftermarket stuff. So we'll put the grease zerk back in and we'll grease them up, and then I'll kind of show you how to check the measurement, and then we will be done for this part of it. So I got them filled up with grease. I started it up and kind of just ran it. You can tell there's still some slack all the way around. I'm going to measure it and get it, like I said, maybe like 1 3/4 inches, and then probably just get it out in the parking lot tomorrow and run it around for a little bit, and then I'll check it again, and then probably run it for maybe a day, and then I'll check it then and see. It should be a couple times. Like I said, it should kind of get stretched out where it's going to be for a little while, but you basically just need to come down here and to the top of the track, to the bottom of that roller. You can see it's like 2.5 inches right now, so needs to go like 3/4 inch. Alright, here. I don't have the lock and lube thing because I wasn't real impressed with it, and I couldn't grease some of these fittings, but sometimes, especially on these tracks, it doesn't always hold like it should. So let's see. So that's about 2. Getting closer. Okay, and that's still 2. Okay, we'll probably call it good there. It's not quite 1 3/4 inches, or just... That'll work for now. We'll do the same thing to the other side, and then clean up our excess grease and put the covers back on. And that is how you change tracks, sprockets, front idlers, and rear rollers on a Takeuchi TL250. Should be pretty much the exact same thing on a 240 and a 230. And really on the H10s and 12s, it's not much different. The biggest thing you guys notice on those is the sprocket is actually moved forward. And Takeuchi's whole reasoning behind why the sprocket's right over the rear roller here is I think they can catch like 2 extra teeth on the drive sprockets over the tracks, where like the way they are now and everybody else's where it's moved over here, you only get like 3, where I think you can get a total of 5. So it was just a little more their kind of idea or push and power deal. It used to, the old ones, which I think is maybe a TL26 or something, they were turquoise and gray then. The drive sprocket is actually like back here, so it comes off the roller, angles up and around, and they were able to even grab another tooth on there. And the biggest reason they changed that is when they came out with the vertical lift machines. The way those are designed, the cylinder that raises and lowers the arms had to be down inside here. So they actually had to kind of reconfigure this and move that drive sprocket forward so that they were able to have room in there for that actual cylinder. The radial series, which is what this is, they don't actually need to have that, but with them changing or coming out with the vertical lift machines and moving that sprocket forward, they just designed the radial versions like the R2s the exact same way. So you got the exact same track, the same frame, everything. Instead of making two separate frames and machines, it was just, you know, going to be it's a lot more cost effective just to have kind of one standard undercarriage. So that's why I like the 8s, 10s, and 12s, R2s and V2s have all moved that sprocket forward and kind of carry that same design. So that was the whole deal there. They just needed some space freed up so they could put that other cylinder. Yeah, we'll run this for a day or whatever, and then we'll check those tracks again in a couple days. Or a couple days of doing that, they should kind of be set in where they're going to be. So you'll notice this in the videos, this machine will be a little bit quieter for a while because the steel pads actually do have just a little bit of rubber over them right now. So it'll quiet it down, but here pretty quick it'll sound like back to being like a tank or a dozer, but it does quiet it down. And like I said, actually the new I think it started with even when they switched over to the H10s and 12s, they did a triple flange roller now instead of a double like they've got here. And it's a whole different design on the track. They actually call it a quiet track because a lot of people kind of complain about the noise and the clacking, which I actually really, I don't know, I like it. I like how it sounds like a little tank, but those actually will have a big piece of rubber that always stays in between the steel pads and the rollers on the machine, so they won't be near as loud like with the clacking like this one does, where it's just steel on steel. Another thing you'll also notice is now the geometry of the bucket is back to when it was new, because as those tracks wear down, the machine actually lowers down. So then when you're grading them with the bucket, you got to compensate and raise it up just a touch, where now you can put the arms all the way down, put the teeth flat, and everything's flat. So it'll last like that, like I said, for quite a while until those tracks start wearing down. But that's one thing, it's real gradual, so you don't notice it until you put new tracks on. Then it's like you kind of got to, you know, rework your grading because you're used to kind of compensating with a little bit of up or down because the tracks are a different height. But and like I said, you won't be able to tell in the videos, but it's going to ride like a Cadillac now, because once you put new tracks on these, and especially with as bad as those rollers and stuff, and I had so much play, it was just getting really rough riding because these tracks are so stiff and rugged that, you know, you get worn down here, then it's just a solid piece of rubber, and there's a little bit of give right now with as thick as those lugs are. But yeah, it's going to be, it'll ride like a brand new machine now, and like I said, be a lot quieter. And I'll have a lot more traction, so I'll have to watch, like if I'm in existing yards or grass or whatever like that, these tracks will actually tear up a lot more with the way you turn and different things. But yeah, the pushing power and the traction will be noticeably different. Hopefully there were some useful tips in there for you, and I appreciate you guys watching, and we will just catch you in the next video.